Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for The Young Folks and film critic for a bunch of other outlets like Boards Watch and The Spool. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and because he's from Pittsburgh, you better believe he's going to talk about it a lot in this episode in particular. It's Will Ashton.
Hey, what's up?
You can find more episodes of our show, including our full archive on cinemaholics.com. You'll also find written reviews and other bonus content there, including our review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which just went live today as we record this. You could write into the show anytime by sending us an email. Our email, as always, is cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support our show, help keep it alive, keep it going, please head on over to patreon.com/cinemaholics. If you'd like to support us, but you can't really swing a donation right now, no worries at all, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if you think we deserve it. Tell us what you like about the show, what you think we could do better in the future, all that fun stuff. And hey, if you're like, okay, but I want Cinemaholics merch. I want to wear a Cinemaholics mug, or wear a Cinemaholics t-shirt, or sip coffee or tea or whatever you want from a mug or a shot glass. You can find all that on the Cinemaholics merch page. That's on cinemaholics.com as well, and links to all this stuff. It's all in the show notes. Well, Ashton, what are we talking about this week on the show?
This week we're talking about Sweet Girl, which just premiered on Netflix.
Is that the first thing we're talking about?
Is it?
I was going to talk about Night House first.
Okay. I mean, I think I have more to say about Sweet Girl than Night House, to be honest.
I'm sure you do.
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I don't want to say anything more because I feel like I will step ahead no matter what I say next. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking we would start with The Night House, just because I think that not that it's the more popular film, but it's it's the big horror movie of the week. I feel like our fans would probably be more interested in that one, but who really knows? But okay, there's Sweet Girl, which is on Netflix. What else?
There's, as you said, The Night House, and there is also a little movie. Not so little, actually. It's supposed to be the biggest film of the week.
Oh yeah,
but it's also the biggest flop of the week, which is Reminiscence.
Is it the biggest flop?
Yeah. Oh, it has to be.
I haven't
It's
looked
like
at the
a
numbers.
huge flop. Yeah, I think the budget was like 65-70 million, if I'm not mistaken, and that's not counting marketing or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I believe
did they do marketing?
As of today, I believe the total gross, at least in the US, is a clean 2 million.
It's a 5 million. I just brought it up, so
okay.
It's still that's atrocious.
That is a big flop.
Okay, well, yeah, we can't say Sweet Girl is a flop because it's a Netflix movie and we don't even know the budget numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know the budget numbers, and and as far as The Night House goes, it's probably fine because that's not an expensive movie and it's only made around 3 million. So, wow.
Yeah, that was an indie. I know, like I told you before, I believe Night House is playing in half as many theaters as Reminiscence, and on Friday alone, I think it made twice as much as Reminiscence. So
you did,
like
you
I said,
did
Reminiscence
that,
is not doing well, which kind of bums me out, to be honest. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I just feel like the fact that a big original sci-fi blockbuster is just doing this horrendously bad, particularly one that's like made for adults, not like a like one that's like trying to jumpstart a franchise or anything like that. Just a big budget, high concept movie is just doing horrendously bad at the box office. It seems like the type of thing that in the short term is not going to be that bad. It's going to be something that most people forget about, but in the long term, it's going to be like, well, we tried that with Reminiscence and look what happened. No one showed up. So, we're going to green light. Yeah.
Can I just, because I know like people are going to say like, you can't blame it all on the pandemic because Free Guy did okay. Right. But my whole thing is like the kind of movie that Reminiscence is, I don't think it probably would have done that great no matter what. But I do think like the mid-budget sort of curiosity, like that kind of movie, needs a lot of marketing. It also needs a lot of word of mouth. It also needs to not come out when, the United States, like North America in general, is at like peak COVID right now. Like cases and deaths are like, I don't think they've ever been this bad. So, and I don't think people have ever been this kind of like feeling hopeless about it. Like not everybody, obviously, but
right.
Certainly like there are some states where hospitals are crammed to the brink, running out of hospital beds. There's some places where, I've seen reports of entire towns that are like ghost towns right now because people are terrified. So
right.
I'm not like, I get it.
I'm not blaming anyone for not seeing it, to be clear. Like I totally get it. I'm just saying, like I said, in the short term, understandable. It's on HBO Max. I imagine most people, like I said, didn't really know about it or didn't even know it was a thing, and they just found out about it because it was on HBO Max. And like I said, the marketing for it has been pretty bad. So I don't blame anybody for not going to the theater to see it. If anything, I'm very sympathetic towards it. But I just also feel like it's a type of thing where, like, because this movie, and like I said, it's mostly the studio's fault for putting it out now, but the fact that it's going to do so badly, and it's already doing so badly, is going to hurt more than help the original sci-fi blockbuster genre in the long run.
I get what you're saying. It's just funny to me too how weird the industry, like how weird awareness and pop cultural noise is, because you could also look at something like The White Lotus, also on HBO Max, and I'm sure White Lotus has better number. I mean, I'm not sure, but I'm fairly confident it has better streaming numbers than Reminiscence. I've seen way more people talk about it, and I've seen way more people interested in that show and writing about that show. I've barely heard a peep about Reminiscence from just people in general. So I could be wrong. It could be one of those things that, like movies on Netflix, that like tons of people watch, even though there's not much chatter. Like some people just see a new thing and Hugh Jackman's on the poster and they hit play. And it could be that kind of situation. I'm sure Warner Brothers is having some real like come to Jesus moments at the moment in terms of like the relationship between their streaming service and theaters, between this and Suicide Squad. They were riding high on, Godzilla versus Kong, right? They're riding high on Mortal Kombat. They're like, man, this is working for us. Like even in a pandemic, we're getting decent box office numbers. We're, people are subscribing. But then when it comes to like their big summer stuff, the stuff that is too big to fail, and that stuff seems to be failing. To what you're saying, I think there's going to be a lot of repercussions in the film industry, particularly through Warner Brothers, in the wake of this past summer box office or lack thereof, and how it relates to streaming. That said, that's probably the best segue we can get into. Oh, and I actually forgot there's one more film we're talking about this week.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about Cryptozoo, that's a little indie darling that we saw at Sundance and finally came out this weekend. It was also a pretty quiet release, unfortunately, though. That one I'm not surprised about. Like, that was just that was always going to be for a niche audience. More than likely the type audience I was going to find out about it years later. But nevertheless, it was kind of just like, oh, yeah, that's finally out. Without much fanfare or notice, this thing is finally available on VOD.
Yeah, and I'm sad I'm not going to actually be able to see it on the big screen. I was hoping that, maybe that would be the case. Maybe you would hit like a few theaters around here. Maybe Delta wouldn't be the thing that it is. For me, like I have to go all the way to like, there's only like one theater I'm aware of in San Francisco that's playing it. They're also playing it in Berkeley, California. But other than that, theaters aren't biting. You can only really get it at like the very niche in art house theaters and some of them at that. And so if it's hard for somebody in the Bay Area to find this movie, I can't imagine if you live in other parts of the U.S., especially more rural areas. So fortunately, you'll be able to stream it at some point. And we'll talk about the movie later in the show because we both have, I know I have a lot of positive things to say, and I think you do too. But first off topics, here are the movies we aren't going to be talking about. Just two we wanted to bring up. First, The Protégé, which is the new Martin Campbell movie. And now I know there's probably a few hundred, maybe a few thousand listeners who are listening. And they're like, well, wait a minute. The Protégé should be the featured review. John Negroni, you've seen every Martin Campbell movie in theaters since you were alive. And that's actually not actually true, but I've seen most of them. And
I was gonna say, like, I was gonna run down his filmography and fact check you on that one because his filmography is nuts.
Starting with GoldenEye, I've seen every single film in theaters. Pretty sure. Unless I'm fibbing on Beyond Borders, I might not have seen that on the big screen first. But I'd have to double check my own memories. Everything else, though, Casino Royale, Legend of Zorro, obviously The Mask of Zorro, the greatest movie ever made. GoldenEye, as I mentioned. What else did you do? Edge of Darkness, for sure.
I was gonna say, did you see Edge of Darkness in theaters?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
because
yeah.
that was during the
College
whole
time.
like, yeah, because that was like around Mel Gibson's like
Mm-hmm.
whatever fifth attempt at a comeback.
It was, and I was working
yeah.
at a movie theater. The only reason I saw it was because I was able to see it for free because I worked there.
Okay.
I don't know if I would have seen it
Right.
otherwise. And yeah, same kind of goes for Green Lantern. Although I wasn't working at a theater at that point, I was on like a summer break kind of thing, doing an internship. But then also, I think the most recent film he did was The Foreigner with Jackie Chan.
Yeah,
Saw that.
yeah,
for
we
sure.
covered that on the show. That was
Yeah,
like
first year at Cinehall.
first year.
Cinehollix.
Yeah.
Year one. But yeah, the Protégé is his latest movie, and I was supposed to see it on Tuesday. I was very excited, much to the chagrin of some other people who were like, "Why are you excited about this movie?" And it's because, you know, when it comes to Martin Campbell, I don't care if it's bad. I'm going to give it a chance. You know, he's made, you know, probably my favorite James Bond movie. He's made my favorite movie of all time, which again is The Mask of Zorro. And I just give the guy a lot of credit. And yeah, for all of his Green Lanterns, you know, you get a few gems in there too. I'll say that. And you know, GoldenEye, I stand by that movie. I know it probably doesn't have the best reputation these days as it used to, but I remember back when I was coming up, people were like, yeah, GoldenEye, that is like that's the gold standard of like modern James Bond movies. You got to go back to Connery to get to the good stuff like that.
Sure. Ironically, the second best gold James Bond film.
Yeah.
But but I think it's still well liked. I mean, I feel like weirdly the N64 game is a little bit more revered or brought up in pop culture. But yeah, I mean, I think it's still. I mean, it's credited as being the film that basically saved the genre or the series. I mean,
yeah.
For at least the short term.
I think most of the backlash too, it's like people have kind of revolted against the Brosnan era. They say that, yeah, GoldenEye is like the only good one, which I say no. My opinion, I actually think GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, and World Is Not Enough is a very solid trilogy with diminishing returns, but I still enjoy all three of those movies unironically. So, you know, it's a different era to be sure, and I don't know if I don't think it's aged super well, but at least GoldenEye.
Yeah, I'm assuming by the way you phrase that means that you enjoy Die Another Day, ironically.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I don't enjoy that movie whatsoever. That was the James Bond movie that made me say, okay, yeah, this is done. We kind of need to. And then Daniel Craig came in with Martin Campbell with Casino Royale and revamped things. Now we have this weird structure where every other James Bond movie is kind of bad, but then every other one is really good. So we're kind of due for a good one.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm sympathetic towards Die Another Day because it's my first Bond, but I can understand why it is not as well liked as the other ones.
I hear you. Yeah, it was weird seeing, Tomorrow Never Dies on the big screen when I was so young, and that movie. Anyway, so The Protégé, which we've been dancing around, again, we haven't seen it. I don't think it's done super well. It's made a couple million at the box office. It stars Maggie Q. I had Winley review it for the young folks. He gave it a 5 out of 10. He had nice things to say, but yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking this could be really good. I mean, Michael Keaton, Samuel L. Jackson are also in this movie, and it just kind of looks like a fun assassin flick set in Vietnam, and kind of got some cool stunt choreography, it looked like, in the trailer. And yeah, it didn't do very well, made very little, and it's on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not a dud. It's like a 61%. But
oh wow,
you know,
that's high. That's higher than I anticipated.
That's higher than you anticipated, huh? Cinema score
61%.
61. Last I checked. I could check again. Hey, maybe it went down. I don't know.
I would have guessed like 35% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, but you didn't see
that
the movie.
That would have been my guess. I know. That's just my guess. That's why I said a guess.
Okay, yeah. You're like just like, you know, throwing a dart at the dartboard with your eyes closed kind of guess.
I saw the trailer before Free Guy, and it looked just like a wet fart of a film.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I love Keaton, and I hope he's doing well, and I hope he gets more great parts in the future, but it just looked like the most generic action movie I've ever seen.
Well, the most generic action movie you never saw is not a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes anymore. It's 62%. So take that.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, you were ready. You were like, yeah, prove me right.
All right.
But that's out in theaters right now through Lionsgate. The other movie, this flick, if you thought a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes was a surprise for The Protégé, just wait till you see the Rotten Tomatoes for Paw Patrol, the movie. And I think the Paw in Paw Patrol stands for something, doesn't it? Like something regarding the show, I guess, because it's all caps.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I've never seen the show. But Paw Patrol, it's a hit computer animated kids show from Keith Chapman. And it's, I think it's like, it started out as like a Canadian thing, right? Like it's more, or it's like based in Canada. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just kind of.
You keep fielding questions to me. I don't know anything about Paw Patrol other than people were mad about it for like 2 days.
I guess
because there's a cop dog in it.
I guess I asked you this, Will Ashton, because you have younger siblings. So I don't know. I didn't know if any of them watched Paw Patrol. None of my nieces or nephews watched it, so you know.
Yeah, my younger siblings are girls, and I think, I mean, not to, any gender can enjoy any show or stuff like that, but I think, primarily speaking, Paw Patrol is geared towards, like, young boys, right?
Now you're fielding the questions to me.
Okay. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I know that this is the rare instance where this is available in theaters and on streaming the same day on Paramount Plus. It actually did pretty well, exceeding expectations.
$35 million at the box office.
Yes.
35.
At a time when movie studios are afraid, family films at least, they're afraid to put their family films in theaters for obvious reasons.
They're afraid to get these films off the leash.
Sure. But, didn't Sony just sell Hotel Transylvania 4 to Amazon Prime recently? And they've a couple other family films, like what we said before, the Pixar movies are just going straight to Disney Plus. Several other Sony movies have gone straight to Netflix.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Cryptozoo and Paw Patrol are like, okay, all right, well, it's late August. Why don't we get a little crazy?
Sure. Well, Cryptozoo obviously is not for kids or families.
I know. I'm just kind of pointing out. I was talking more of like the animated factor.
Sure, I knew what you meant, but yeah, Paw Patrol, they didn't give a heck about any sort of variants or pandemics or diseases that are going around. They're putting that thing in theaters on the big screen. They're not settling for the small screen anymore. This is a movie, not a show, and sure enough, it is doing, like you said, quite well. I debated. I tried lightly nudging you to be like, hey, this is doing well, maybe we should cover this on the show. And John was like
a Labrador, kind of
like a reasonable adult
trying to nudge me like take me on a walk. No, I look, I had to draw the line somewhere. I tried it was hard for me to watch what we did. It's a very, very busy season for me in particular, so if I had to choose between movies, Paw Patrol was very far from my list. I'm sad to say. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Rotten Tomatoes wise, last I saw was like 86%. There was a Variety review, which was like championing the films as a tribute to essential workers.
Yeah, that was the most pandemic brain review capsule I've ever seen to date. I'm sure it's going to only get worse from here. Yeah.
And we're talking about a movie, by the way, with the voice talent of Kim Kardashian, Tyler Perry, and Jimmy Kimmel. I'll just put that out there. In
supporting roles, I believe. I don't think they're the dogs, but I have no idea who voices the dogs.
Well, Kim Kardashian voices a poodle. I know that.
Oh, all right. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that information. I now know it. But I'm sure I can, remove whatever important chemistry or physics knowledge that's fizzling out of my brain and put that in there instead and know that forever. So thank you, John.
Sorry about that. But hey, all that to say, thanks to Paramount Plus and the Paw Patrol gang, our friends, our possum friends at Paw Patrol, we Nickelodeon movies are back. There is that. I know we had SpongeBob. Yeah, this is Nickelodeon, isn't it? We had SpongeBob earlier this year. I don't remember if that really did super well, to be honest. I mean, it was kind of still heavy pandemic times. Did it not go to any theaters?
I went to theaters in Canada, not in the U.S.
Okay. Well, yeah. Then in terms of theatrical release and box office, yeah, Nickelodeon movies are back. I'll say it. Harriet the Spy 2 coming to theaters soon.
Oh man, I don't know if you are dissing on Harriet the Spy, but I'm quite a fan of that film.
I
actually think it's
how am I
genuinely quite
dissing?
good.
I'm calling for a sequel.
Fair enough.
Yeah. We don't have anything
Good
else
film.
to say, I don't think, about Paw Patrol the movie. Just that it is an interesting development in the year that really is just. I mean, we're only in August. We have a few months left of this year, and I'm sure the surprises are just going to keep on coming. On that note, by the way, we'll say TIFF is coming up. So
Yes.
yeah, we'll be doing some TIFF coverage. I assume I'll be attending TIFF. Will Ashton will be babysitting the kids. I
Yes.
don't know. I don't know who the kids are in this metaphor I just created, but the other releases of the week.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I was gonna make up some names for our kids, but I feel like you kind of want to get the ball rolling to these reviews that we have.
It's about time to do that. Yeah. But speaking of kids,
Yeah.
let's go to a house, and not just any house.
Oh,
The Night House.
My husband took the boat out on the lake. He took a handgun that I didn't even know that we owned, and
Did he leave a note?
he did. You were right. There is nothing. Nothing is after you. You're safe now.
You said you were safe? Safe from what?
That's right. I went with my gut on this. I went with The Night House, much to your disappointment, I assume. But we'll get through The Night House. We'll talk about the film. We'll give our review. We'll get to the film that
Sure.
Will Eschen really wants to talk about in just a moment. But I do want to get to The Night House. The Night House is a new horror film. I believe it premiered at Sundance 2020. So it's been kind of, in the release limbo for a little while now. So I think it's on, kind of like that final stretch of Sundance 2020 pictures, still kind of being, still kind of trickling out over time. And this one is coming to us from Searchlight Pictures, which, as you might remember, Searchlight used to be Fox Searchlight, and Disney kind of recommodified it into Searchlight Pictures without the Fox. And it, like I said, horror film. I'd say that this is like a psychological horror thriller. Also has a very mysterious kind of bent to it. It's maybe more like a psychological horror mystery, probably more mystery than thriller, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe with some thriller elements here and there. This movie is coming to us from David Bruckner, who is an American film director. He wrote and co-directed The Signal from 2007, and he also did
VHS.
VHS.
Well,
the horror
that was an
anthology.
anthology film.
Is it?
Yeah, I think The Signal's also anthology. I think because he did 3 anthology films, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen The Signal, but I have seen VHS.
I think you're right. I think Signal is part of Crazy in Love, isn't it? And then VHS, but the VHS he did something different because that was years later. That was he did a segment in VHS. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on what the name of it is, but I have seen it. I just I forget. I think he did. He did The Ritual most recently. I was going to get to that.
That was his feature directorial debut, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. With Joe Barton as screenwriter. That had Rafe Spall in it. A couple other people I'm forgetting, but that also a kind of horror movie. I remember kind of liking The Ritual. I don't remember what you thought of it. I'm pretty sure we talked about it. That was like first year Cinemaholics.
I don't think we talked about it on the show. That was one of the ones I watched during my October marathon. So I think I watched that one individually, but I have seen it.
Yeah, I remember watching it. I might have talked about it with Maverick, actually. I don't know if you were there for that, but I'd have to revisit the archives. So that said, that's David Bruckner. He's back for a couple years later now, because he did it 2020 technically, with The Night House, which stars Rebecca Hall. Now, I'm a big fan of Rebecca Hall. Love her work. Great actress. I still think to this day, probably my favorite movie from her would have to be Christine. If you have not seen Christine, absolutely add it to your list. It's a fantastic movie.
How did she not get nominated for that performance?
I have no idea. I was thinking that was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think she got Independent Spirit Award nominations or anything like that. I think she was just complete. I could be totally wrong. I'm
Me
speaking
too.
out of turn,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I don't remember how things went over with her. Yeah, in general there, but she's had a kind of a rough couple of years before 2020 in terms of her film roles. Okay. I liked Permission.
I hope she's doing well. And
oh yeah, I'm not talking
in
about
her personal life. At
level.
least.
Yeah. I haven't talked to her in a while, so I got to catch up with her over some drinks or something. But yeah, no, she's been a part of just like kind of some small things here and there. Holmes and Watson is probably like the biggest blemish. She was also in Rainy Day in New York, the Woody Allen from 2019.
Yeah, she has like a cameo in that.
Yeah, I don't know the extent. I never saw the movie, so I don't know the extent of her role in that. But I kind of avoided that one for obvious reasons.
Sure.
Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. So we never talked about this movie, or I didn't talk about this movie because I saw it way later. I saw it like 2019 or something.
Yeah.
I didn't love that movie. I kind of was really let down by it, to be totally honest. But she was.
Yeah, I wasn't.
She was okay.
I saw it at screening. I wasn't crazy about it, but I thought her performance was very good.
Yeah, I think no matter what, I've never seen a bad Rebecca Hall performance, to be clear. And so, and that goes for Passing, the Sundance film that we checked out earlier this year. I think you saw Passing as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. She also did that movie with what's his face, the guy from Legion.
You're talking about Permission, right?
Is that Permission?
Permission, yeah.
I know you're a big fan of that film.
Dan Stevens.
I never got a chance. Yeah, Dan Stevens. Okay, I was blanking on his name.
Yeah, that's Permission.
I know you were a big fan of that film. I didn't get a chance to see it, but
really good. Yeah. I thought Passing was okay. Like I liked aspects of it. I didn't love the whole thing, but I
liked it.
Her thing with Tessa Thompson in that movie is actually really it really has stuck with me. Like their dynamic in the movie. I don't love the story of the movie as much, or like kind of where it goes. I think it kind of cops out a little bit on some of its themes, but wow, the chemistry between those two characters is something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the type of debut where it's so ambitious and like so deliberately cinematic and stuff like that, that it does feel like, okay, like if she's going to continue directing, she's going to make big idea films, which is very exciting to see from a first-time filmmaker, especially one who's already been established, like we said, from several other films.
Her most recent movie was Godzilla vs. Kong. And I know, everybody was like, yeah, we're going to get to Godzilla vs. Kong, true showcase for Rebecca Hall as a performer. And yeah, I mean, I barely remember anything that kind of happened in that movie, particularly around her, actually, now that I think about it.
I remember her being the best performance, or one of the best performances. It was like her and the child.
I remember now. Yeah. She's like the researcher. She's kind of like the Kong, sympathizer. Okay. Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah, she was good in the like you said, I don't know if she's ever been truly bad. I mean, she's been in bad films like Lay the Favorite. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I have not.
It's a Stephen Frears film from like 6 years ago. Not a great film, but she did her best.
I think that's Bruce Willis, isn't it? And
well, he's in it.
Catherine Zeta,
quote unquote. Yes.
I'm not saying he directed it. Wouldn't that be something though?
I meant quote unquote in that like I don't think he really gave a shit like he usually does.
Oh really? You don't say about Bruce Willis in an early 20-teens movie. But yeah, in terms of The Night House, I'm going to extend that sort of like, yeah, it's Rebecca Hall, and her performance I think elevates this horror movie too. The setup is that she is a widow who is in this house that her late husband built. You learn a lot of things over the course of the movie of like the circumstances behind his death. There's a mystery factor to why or how this would have happened. She's having these night terrors. There's a lot of stuff going on in this movie about like sleep paralysis. And at the beginning of this movie, I was like, okay, it's a horror movie about grief. Yet again, how many of these movies do we need? Like, yes, the first 70 horror movies about grief, I was like, okay, good idea. Horror, the horror of grief, it goes well together. And I was thinking about during this movie too, like there is this sort of backlash to the idea of elevated horror, but I think if a better term was applied, it's sort of just like using horror as a facilitation or catharsis for mental health and deeply emotional human experiences. I think there is like a level to that I think is really exciting and really interesting. Movies like Relic do that with Alzheimer's, right, and dementia. And The Night House is kind of doing that for part of it, but then it kind of stops being a horror movie about grief.
Yeah, well, both of those movies, as you mentioned, are house-related as well.
True. Yes. There's
Yes.
like a, I mean, I would not argue otherwise, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just saying I'm a little bit sick of the trope, and I'll let you get into it in your kind of general thoughts there too. But that's the basic setup. I mean, I don't want to give up too much of this movie. I'd say that there are some okay supporting performances. I like Sarah Goldberg in this. Sarah Goldberg from Barry, who has kind of a small role, but she does well with it. And I also liked Evan Jonkeed, who we've seen him in like Days of Future Past, and I think he was in Bone Tomahawk too. I liked him in this as well. But overall, I kind of was not super into this movie, to be totally honest. I'm seeing raves, but my big issue, which I'll just, set up real quick here, I just don't, by the time you get to the end of the movie, it really just threw me off what this movie was trying to say, what it's trying to be. And it's just one of those movies where I think the ending kind of ruins the stuff that I liked leading up to it. And the stuff I liked leading up to it was already kind of few and far between. I was already kind of like, man, this is really messy. This is really jumbled. I don't know. It just didn't quite work for me. But Will, what about you?
I'm not too far from where you are, but I did find myself a little similarly kind of wondering why the movie is getting so heavily praised. It sounds like I'm maybe a little bit more positive than you are, and I think that primarily comes from Rebecca Hall's performance. I think her character as well is also, like it's not the most original or unique character, but I do like that she's like kind of darkly funny, outspoken. I like that Rebecca Hall's performance is like she's allowed to kind of like chew it up a little bit and really have like these kind of intense monologues and really just relish the role as much as possible. And as we're talking about performances, one I don't think you mentioned, but another one that I really liked was from Von D. Curtis Hall, who plays Mel the neighbor. I thought he was quite good. He's a pretty proven character actor who doesn't really ever get like a lead role, but in something like this, it's nice to see him get a prominent supporting role. And I thought he did a nice
good
job.
In the movie. Yeah.
And I think Stacey Martin did a pretty nice job as well. It's kind of weird to, I guess this isn't technically like a mainstream film, though it is getting a semi-wide release, but it did feel a little jarring to be seeing her in like an AMC theater type movie.
After Lars von Trier's movie, huh? That was almost a decade
Nymphomaniac,
ago.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Not quite, but about 8 years now, I think.
Man.
Actually, 7 years. I think that was 2014.
I think it was 2013, but maybe in the US it was 2014 release.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I think it might have premiered at Cannes in 2013. Yes, Cannes. Can.
I think of it as a 2013 movie, but I think I did see it in 2014 to what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this is one of those movies where, as you're mentioning, like I think I like the stuff around it. Like I like the buildup of dread. I like the eeriness of the score. I like the kind of like building suspense of it. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen all this before and seen it both better and worse in other films. And like you said, I feel like the way that the movie had a resolution that felt a bit pat, or like it kind of felt like this need to over-explain things in a way that felt reductive, because we, like it's all right to be inferred what the movie is about and what it's trying to say, and the way that it kind of has to like tie everything up in a sort of neat little bow is a common problem, I think, with horror movies of late, where they kind of feel like they have to kind of like pull the wool out and like reveal the monster, you know what I mean? Like kind of like reveal what the big bad thing actually is. And I feel like horror is traditionally more effective when we don't really know what it is, or we have that kind of lingering sense of doubt or mystery. And the movie doesn't, when it comes to the ending, it sure feels like it's not as confident in just letting the storytelling dictate itself. It almost kind of feels like it needs to really hammer home what it's saying or what it's about. And yeah, it's disappointing, but at the same time, I do appreciate that David Bruckner, this movie does feel at peace with his previous film. And, I don't think either film is saying anything particularly new or revolutionary about depression or our relationship to grief, and just like our just general sort of unknowable relationship with nature and all that stuff. But I think as a sort of middle of the road horror movie, I think it's effective enough. Like I was never like truly bored, but like I said, especially towards the middle, I just kind of found myself sort of like not fully engaging with it because it felt like a lot of setup that I've seen in other movies and seen in other films done a little bit more effectively or a little bit more nuanced. And this just kind of felt like I had a kind of been there, done that quality to it that was a little underwhelming, at least from my experience.
Yeah, I think the way through the movie, I agree with that criticism that you put out there, just in terms of like, it really just lays it on thick by the end, where I think that ambiguity would have gone a long way. It would have beggared more discussion from people and sort of unpacking like, man, what is this movie really saying about these really heavy themes? And, particularly one theme that I don't necessarily want to give away, that I do think by the end, I kind of decided for myself, at least, that I think that it does handle one aspect of its thematic storytelling pretty irresponsibly. I thought it was just sort of like presented in a very kind of gross way. And for me, it's a shame because there are other things this movie brings up that I think are so interesting, but they just don't go super well with everything else. Like there's this persistent message of like, what happens after we die? What length would you go to find out if ghosts are real and there's like an afterlife? And a lot of that stuff, I was like, man, that's very interesting. That's kind of fresh material for a movie like this. And, complete with the whole idea of like the house being a maze and a sort of like, maybe there's a demonic presence coming in, sort of silhouettes and shapes of the building itself, not necessarily like a shadow in the night. Like whenever stuff like that happened, I was like, man, this is an interesting movie. And then, when you add in the Rebecca Hall performance, which I agree with you, darkly funny, she gets all of these really great moments and she carries this movie quite a bit. She's in practically every scene. And if she's not, she's felt, and the movie revolves around her to a great degree. And I think that's the good thing about that, is that she's a fantastic performer. And I was always invested in her character and hoping the best for her, even though she doesn't always do likable things. The problem is that this movie is very repetitive. It kind of goes on a lot of like the same, it kind of is in a maze itself for a lot of the runtime. And I was kind of like, all right, just get to the point. And let's get this thing done. And I don't know, like the thing that I think people might be responding to as well is that it does avoid some of the pitfalls and traps that these movies can have, where you're in the movie and the main character, the person sort of experiencing all the horror, has like the same reaction to everything. What I liked about this movie, to its credit, is that I always felt like her reactions to things happening to her, there was a range. There were times when she would like accept what was going on, or she would sort of like lean into it, which I was always feeling like she's as unpredictable as the like horror stuff. Like she's a good like matchup to whatever is haunting her. Stuff like that was really solid. I guess where this movie lets me down quite a bit is that last like 15, 20 minutes, where I just think that all that good stuff, it's a mystery kind of movie, so you really need it to land. And where they go with it really left a bad taste in my mouth personally. And I guess that, mileage will vary. Some people it won't. I'd say that if you're maybe like not the biggest fan of horror films and you're kind of half and half on like the modern horror therapy kind of movie, I don't know. This one you might want to be pretty careful with. That's definitely where I stand at this current moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a tightrope when you tackle that topic that you're referring to, and I don't think the movie is necessarily as irresponsible as you're suggesting, but I can understand why you feel that way. And I know, obviously, as you mentioned before, that you have a lower tolerance for horror movies that are actually secretly or not secretly about grief. You find it to be a well-trod territory in the genre, and you just generally don't like these type of things. And I don't dispute that, but I generally, I guess, I'm a little bit more sympathetic towards it. But for me, I guess this is a rare horror movie where I think I was more invested in the dramatic moments than the actual horror scenes, which I found interesting. I think that's primarily a credit to Rebecca Hall's performance. I think I was just really intrigued with her character and the way that she was approaching the performance, and giving some intriguing instincts to this performance in a way that really stands out and showcases her dynamic range as a performer, especially as she ventures out into different dramatic territories. But yeah, I mean, I don't dispute anything you're saying necessarily, and I don't think anything you say is wrong. I just find myself, I guess, maybe a little bit more sympathetic for it, because I admire the hustle and the ambiguity of the opening or at least I guess like first 2/3 of the film. And I really enjoy, like I said, all the shadows and the way that the house kind of like starts to eat her alive, basically, especially in one key scene. I don't know if those effects are primarily digital or practical, or maybe a mix of the two, but I think all that stuff is fantastic, and I was
it's cool.
really digging that. Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and that was to me like where the movie was at its height, and I kind of wish that was like the central climax of it, and not the actual climax that we get, which, like you said, just feels a little too neat and a little too verging on irresponsible, I guess, in its handling of the topic. But I mean, there's cool stuff here, and like I said, I really admire the way that kind of builds up dread and suspense. But ultimately, I also kind of feel like everything this movie does, with the exception of Rebecca Hall's performance, has been dived in other films and sometimes done better.
Yeah, there's one scene I wanted to bring up because you mentioned sort of how some of the dramatic scenes are some of your favorite, and I want to echo that for sure. I think there's a scene here where she's sort of, having like a drink with a couple of her coworkers, and I love that scene. Like that scene, I would watch it like 10 times on YouTube because it is just such a fantastic showcase for how Rebecca Hall, she's just so good at taking her dialogue and just like inserting like 10 different emotions into it. So you never quite know how people are going to react to her and then how she's going to react to them reacting. And it's so tense, and there's a cringe factor to it, but it's one where you just feel like the main actress is totally in control of the conversation. And there's so much going on in that scene. It's really fantastic, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the best scenes of the film. And I love how she like chews on each line, like trying to like get as much juice out of them as possible. It's just such a well delivered scene, especially for her performance.
One last thing I wanted to mention, I saw a lot of people comparing this to The Invisible Man and Hereditary, and I don't really follow that super well. I don't know. I didn't quite catch those two movies as solid comparisons. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, especially because they're both recent. But I mean, I don't think either of them are like point for point the exact same thing, but
I don't know if I could tell someone who's like, oh, I liked Invisible Man, and I'm like, oh, then that means you would. I don't think I could be like, oh, that means you'll like The Night House, or like if you liked Hereditary, I don't know if that means you'll like The Night House. I don't know. I just feel like they're too different to compare in that way, even though there are some similarities, I guess. I don't know. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I got you. I mean, I'll admit that I was thinking of Invisible Man during one particular scene. But not like, oh, this is just doing the same thing. Just kind of just like, that's, kind of interesting that this movie's coming out around the same time as Invisible Man. And kind of doing something of a similar vein in that respect for that one scene. But I don't think the whole movie is like trying to tackle that same concept.
That's curious. Yeah, I didn't think about the Invisible Man at all in this movie, which is, yeah. But it sounds like for a lot of other people, that's certainly happening. So all that said, that is The Night House. It's currently available to watch right now in movie theaters. I think it's wide release, if I'm not mistaken. We kind of mentioned this earlier, but it has made $3 million.
Yeah, I think it's like semi-wide. Like I said, I think it's like 1,500 theaters or something.
I think it's more than that. I think it's like in the 2000s.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow. All right.
I believe in.
Right on.
But I think that might be if you combine United States and Canada, because I think I was looking at North America. So.
Yeah. I know it was a significantly less amount of theaters locally than something like Reminiscence or PAW Patrol.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it was playing at all the like main local like theater chains I saw in the Bay Area. So, but to what you're saying, Reminiscence had more showtimes. It had more, there was more like marketing stuff for it. I saw. So yeah, what are you gonna do there? But that said, the film definitely has one of the higher Rotten Tomato scores of the week, 85%. Last I saw. So pretty high, especially for a horror movie. Cinema score, though, C-. So, obviously cinema score should always be like a grain of salt for sure. But yeah, casual moviegoers, probably not as much for them. And I get some critics, very few critics like me. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I know you saw it at home. You had a digital screener. I saw it on a Saturday night with a mix of like normies and some people. You could generally tell like horror fans, and I could tell just from the audience reaction that normies weren't really willing to take the movie seriously. I'll just say that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I would love to talk to like other people who've seen it. It seems like it's, critics like it, but yeah, I'm still a little bit like, I wonder what the casual moviegoer is really going to think like over time as this film perhaps gets streamed on one of the services and whatnot. So that is The Night House. It is currently 110 minutes long. Let's get to our next film here. Sweet Girl is a new Netflix movie. This is an American action, political, conspiracy thriller set in, I believe, Philadelphia. Allentown, Pennsylvania. And, you okay, Will?
I mean, it's, like you said, an American film because it is filmed in the heart of America, in my view.
I said Philadelphia.
Which is, sure, nothing against Philadelphia. I've been there a few times. I think I've also been to Allentown a couple times. But,
I've been to Allentown.
this is... Okay.
Pottsville,
Do you want to talk
Pennsylvania.
about?
Sorry.
Sure. Do you want to talk about Allentown a little bit more? You have more to say about Allentown?
Probably more to say about that than this movie, but sorry.
Sure.
No, sorry. Where does the movie take place? Will Ashton.
It takes place in my neck of the woods, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, you don't say while you're, live messaging me while watching this movie, all the different Pittsburgh locations that you're seeing.
Yes.
Which I appreciate.
I think it was also... Sure. It's not as much of a Pittsburgh film as, say, American Pickle, which came out last year, and it was like maybe the most Pittsburgh, New York film I've ever seen.
Even more than Perks of Being a Wallflower?
Well, that's like Pittsburgh. Like, that's actually more suburban Pittsburgh. So that's actually, that's like really my neck of the woods. But I remember American Pickle, like several times I'd go to work and I just like would have to skirt around like the film crew because they were just like, they were constantly filming around me. I didn't have the same experience with Sweet Girl, though I know other people were like roads were blocked off because they're filming this movie, or there's like a big action scene that you might remember midway through that they had to desert the streets for, and that, traffic in Pittsburgh is already a pain in the ass. And when you're filming a big movie and blocking off like 3 or 4 of the major streets, that's not a good way to win over people. I'll just say that.
Sure. And we should say this movie finished production right before COVID, like I think a few weeks before lockdown. So that's the only reason this movie is that kind of finished when it did, I guess.
I think they might have, I don't know, I don't know this for sure, but I'm wondering, they might have had to do like some reshoots during the pandemic. I don't know if that was the case or not, but I think that might be the reason why.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, reshoots are pretty common, so yeah. But I'm sure they did all the big crowd scenes, like all the stuff that really requires, a
right. Yeah, no, that was 2019.
World. Yeah, that probably would have been 2019 when they did it.
Yeah, no, I know for sure it was because I remember when they were filming it.
Yeah. You were there. I looked for you in the crowd and I didn't see you.
No, unfortunately, this is not the case. This is not an American Pickle situation where I was there and it got cut out. I never did any extra work for this movie. Not that I didn't want to, I just didn't have the opportunity. But
Where'd You Go, Bernadette? The other, it doesn't take place in Pittsburgh, but anyway.
Yes. One day they'll release the Will Ashton cuts of both films, I hope. But that day has not yet come.
That's right. And listeners, if you're like, well, I want to see a Will Ashton cut of something, well, you still have Mindhunter episode 9 or whatever it is, and you still have Perks of Being a Wallflower. There's a couple scenes.
Yes.
There's a couple scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sweet Girl stars Jason Momoa and Isabella Merced, excuse me. They starred in this movie. I mentioned it. It was it's like a political kind of thriller. It's like a pharmaceutical CEO, kind of bribery stuff. Super well timed for this movie to come out when science and the medical, world is under a bit of scrutiny by people who are, So this movie was directed by Brian Andrew Mendoza. This is his first film. I don't know if he's worked on anything else or what his background is. I think this is the first I've ever heard of him.
He is apparently Jason Momoa's friend.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. I wish I was Jason Momoa's friend. I would.
Yeah, he seems like a fun time.
I mean, you know what I would do? I wouldn't make a movie with him. I don't want to make a movie. I would co-write a novel with the guy. I bet that would be fun.
All right. Now I would just party with him because you'd probably get to hang out with Is he married to Lisa Bonet?
But see, if you write a novel with him, then you get to do the rap party. You get a party still out of it, but you also get a novel. So, and he's with Lisa.
Why not just make a movie? Why not just write a screenplay together? and then make the movie.
I'm too intimidated. Novels are more fun.
Sure.
Writing screenplays, to me, it's like looking at math formulas. It's just not for me. But yeah. But that said, it stars him. It also stars Isabela Merced, who we've seen in so many things. We've seen her in, like that Dora the Explorer movie. We saw her in the Instant Family, which I always like to mention. That movie is like weirdly, surprisingly good, with her and Mark Wahlberg. I like it. You just let it happen. It's going to stand the test of time. Okay. You wait and see. It has Margot Martindale in it. How could you? What else you want?
Well, I have nothing against her. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and Rose Byrne.
I thought it was fine. Yeah, I know a lot of people like that film, and whatever helps you, whoever helps people get through the day.
Sure. She's been in some other stuff. She was in that Let It Snow movie, I think. She did a voice in Spirit Untamed, and she was in what was that other movie? Oh, Sicario, Day of the Soldado. So
Oh yeah.
Few hits, few misses.
Yeah, that role was pretty intense for her. I remember that.
For sure. It definitely was an experience, I'm sure, for her as a young actor. And in this movie, I would say also pretty intense. She's kind of in this action movie with Jason Momoa. She gets her own share of action too. I didn't recognize too many other people in the cast here. There are a few. There's some few. Like there's like a hitman played by Manuel Garcia Rulfo. We had Razo Jaffrey, Justin Bartha from.
Yes.
I always remember him.
The other guy from The
National
Hangover.
Treasure and Hangover.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Those are the two movies I think of. Yeah, he's Doug in The Hangover, which I guess I don't know, which movie do you think is bigger, Hangover or National Treasure? Hard to say, huh? Both big films.
I mean, I think Hangover was a bigger film at the moment, but it's become sort of like a flash in the pan sort of thing. Like I don't think nowadays it's like as well regarded as it was in like 2008. But National Treasure, the legacy lives on, and people are still demanding.
That's just the name of the third movie, probably. Sure. National Treasure, the legacy lives on. That's the name of the third one that'll come out someday, I bet.
Maybe.
Yeah, so he's in this movie. He doesn't have a big role in this, but he's part of the film. And the setup here is that there's this pharmaceutical company. They have this, like, I guess it's kind of billed as like a miracle treatment for people with cancer. Our main character, his name is Ray. He and his daughters, his wife and his daughter's mother, she has had cancer and is trying to get on a trial for this treatment that could save her life. But then something happens and it gets revoked for some reason, and has something to do with the greediness of this pharmaceutical tech thing. It's literally called Bioprime, which, of course. And all that to say, these characters have a bit of a grudge against what happened. They get caught up in this conspiracy involving bribery and hitmen and political intrigue. None of it is interesting. This movie's a real slog. If it hadn't been on Netflix, I don't think I would have seen it. I think that I would have kind of stayed pretty far away from it based on any of the marketing. I haven't seen the trailer, but just in general, it didn't really look like it was going to be my thing. And this movie, I think the only thing I'm seeing people talk about with this movie is that its twist is so bonkers. And I was going to ask you about that. It genuinely elicited laughs from me. Like it really did.
Me too.
It almost makes the experience worth it, because now we can actually talk about a movie like this that does this. And I'm sure this will be referenced many times in Cinemaholics episodes future, where we're like, okay, but it's not like the twist in Sweet Girl. Like, remember that? So, yeah, what did you think of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, like I said last week, I knew someone who worked on the film. I didn't see any marketing materials for it or anything. I honestly forgot it was coming out until like a few days ago. But I had heard stories, and I won't divulge those stories, but the impression I was given by the person who I knew worked in the film, who did second unit, was that it was going to be quite bad, because he had read some of the script and he had read the twist, and he didn't tell me what the twist was, but he's just like, man, like it's like this is just basically like a vanity project for Jason Momoa. It's just kind of something that kind of boosts up his ego after Aquaman, and I think that helped true. Like I think you never know with a film as far as like production. Maybe it gets saved in the edit, Maybe they figure it out as they continue filming. But with a film like Sweet Girl, I just think it was kind of dead in the water from the get-go, unfortunately. Because on paper, I mean, this seems like my bag. Like, it's a Pittsburgh shot, 90s-esque action thriller about a guy going after the, big farm, basically, and the corrupt medical system that we have in this country. And I'm like, on paper, if you tell me that, I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah, let's
give
go.
that to me now. Yeah. Let's do this. Jason Momoa, I think in the right role, I think he can be a very fun, sort of disarming screen presence. There's something, you can't really put your finger on what his star presence is. And I don't know if it's fully formed yet, but I think there's something unmistakable about him that, it's not like an Arnold thing where he's otherworldly, but there is something, he has a unique screen presence. And I do think that in an action scene, he does kind of have the rough and tumble to stand out. And there are a few action scenes in this that I think have kind of they're not quite gritty, but you can tell that people got banged up and bruised and people are hitting each other on metal poles and smashing through wooden banisters and stuff like that. And those scenes struck me as, as a Netflix watcher,
For me,
they're kind of amusing.
Those are okay. I can check my phone now scenes because I'm
really? Those are moments where
I don't care. I know what's going to happen at the end of the fight, and nothing happening in the fight.
Sure.
I don't feel anything, so I'm I can just check my phone. I'll see who wins the fight in the end. Okay.
See, I'm the opposite, where I'm kind of interested in that because, stuff's happening. The rest of the film, there's no sense of style or pacing in this thing. Like I said, it is just kind of slogging its way through one predictable action beat to the next in a screenplay that is woefully generic, almost comically generic in terms of how it's plotted and staged.
You could call it generic crime. I mean...
Yeah. But, when I was watching this, I think back to, Netflix, I mean, obviously they make a lot of great films here and there, and they have some prestige films, but I feel 3 out of 4 times they make movies that you fold laundry to, stuff you can hear in the background and you can follow because they just explicitly tell you everything you're supposed to know and feel about the characters, and they have no real sense of visual language because everything's just supposed to be telegraphed as people are absentmindedly watching it while doing other things. And I kept thinking about that watching this film because you said midway through, I try to be as professional as possible when I watch these films, but I just can't give a heck after a point. The movie has, you can tell no one involved really seems to care or really invest in the story or the dramatic arts of it, and it's just it's impossible not to want to just check your phone midway through because the pacing at times feels like you're pulling teeth. But I do think the action beats are kind of amusing, at least for me, seeing the different points in Pittsburgh, the fact that there is a giant action scene about 1/4 the way through the film on the T is something as a Pittsburgher that I find very amusing because either the most accurate, inaccurate thing about this film, and do you mind if I do light spoilers, John, or are you going to be upset?
Let's do a light spoilers warning for Sweet Girl. Starting now. Skip ahead, use the show notes, the chapter skip to get to the next review.
Okay, this is easily my favorite scene in the whole film. Because, we have this scene where it's hey, I'm from Fox. I need to tell you something. Okay, what do you need? No, we can't talk about it over the phone. Meet me in the trolley stop. And then, obviously, Jason Momoa goes to the trolley stop. Has beautiful, perfect cell phone reception underground the trolley, which isn't possible. I dare anyone to try to call someone in the T in the middle of the thing. He meets up with the Fox guy. He's like, hey, what's up? He's just oh, hey, that thing was just gets stabbed immediately. Everyone gets out of the trolley, of course, because some guy just got stabbed. They're fighting, obviously, banging each other's heads. The T driver could not give less of a heck. Just keeps driving. He's next stop, Station Square. And I don't know if that's the most accurate, inaccurate thing about the movie, that the T driver just keeps going through all the destinations. People are flying out of the window, and it's just all right, next stop.
See, well, it's so funny you say that because Shang-Chi comes out next week and it does the same thing, but then it does have an explanation for why the bus driver has no idea what's happening, and it's really hilarious. It's going to be hilarious for you, I think, in particular, to see what they tried to do to explain that. So I'll warn you there.
Yeah, I think it's funnier that they just don't explain this film. They just don't care. It's just that's like I said, it's either the most accurate, inaccurate thing about the movie. It's just that he's just like, yeah, they don't pay me enough to care. I'm just gonna keep going. Like the lady's just like, a guy just died. It's like, not my problem. I just have, yeah.
I love that they got Nelson Franklin for that role. And yeah, to what you're saying, like, that sums up the movie so well. It's like 10 minutes or something of like, now you have to go here, now you have to go there. Like all of this build up and setup. He's like, sorry, it was a precaution. Still just immediately. Like, it is pretty laughable. I didn't forget to mention, well, I don't know if I told you, but I know somebody who worked on the film too.
Oh?
Yeah, Jason Momoa. We were working on a novel together. And you know what he told me when we were we were group texting, and
sharing cigars and drinking brandy in his
underwater
wooden cabin or whatever. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. we were there. We were in Atlantis, and he was kind of just like, who do you think should play my daughter in a movie? And I gave him a list, and I kind of went through all the picks and everything like that. And he was like, yeah, these are all good picks. I like these picks. But I'm going to have to go with somebody else completely. And I was like, okay, well, you asked me my opinion. Isabela Merced. So there's this sort of like these two characters are related is the idea behind this movie. And I kind of just, I don't know. I'm a little frustrated because I don't see it, but I don't know if that's just me. You know what I mean? Like I just looked at it and I was like, I didn't buy for a second that she, because I know they try to play it up with like the mother is kind of vaguely Hispanic, but Jason Momoa is not Hispanic and he doesn't look Hispanic. And I don't think Isabela Merced looks like a cross between those two characters. And it was just something that kind of threw me off. And it was like a sort of like, we'll wave it away. I think it's fine because they both have vaguely tan skin. Do you hear what I'm saying at all?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't buy that they were, related in blood, but it didn't this time around it didn't bother me as much. I do think she is better than this material deserves.
I agree with
which
that.
is generally how I feel about
she's a great
how
actress.
I feel about because I don't know. I think personally her filmography leaves something to be desired, generally speaking. I mean, the Door movie was fine, but I don't think she's been attached to too many good films, but I think she's generally, if not the best thing, one of the best things about the films. And I don't think this film is an exception at all. I think she's probably the best performance in it because, she actually is giving dramatic urgency to this role, and it doesn't feel like it's just a paycheck for her. It feels like she's, still trying to prove herself as a young and up and coming star. But, there's only so much you can do with this script, I think.
I think that is the case. And you know what? She's a young actor, bright future ahead of her, I think. I think she's only like in her early 20s right now. So I'm not going to be super negative with her performance or anything. Or I guess this is just that kind of movie where it's not one thing. It's just kind of everything put together. There's a part in this movie where literally like one of the like villain characters is like, you have no idea like what you're stepping into. It's like dialogue like that feels like it's straight out of The Office, like something like Michael Scott would say in one of his fake movies. Like it really does have that kind of energy.
You gotta admit though, he had a cool shotgun. Or I guess it was technically the bullets, but it was
all right.
Those moments kind of briefly woke me up. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool.
But I think probably because of the sound. So
sure, yeah. What?
That's Sweet Girl. It's streaming on Netflix. Pretty popular on Netflix. I think it was in the top 10. Might still be in the top 10. 21%. Number one? Was it number one? I didn't see. I thought Brand New Cherry
It was number one
Flavor
on
was
Saturday.
Okay.
Maybe it upset it, but when I put it on Saturday, it was number one.
And sometimes, but you know what though, Will? I think sometimes top 10 can be regional. So
you've mentioned this before. I'm just telling you my experience.
I'll tell you mine, and mine is I don't really actually remember. So I'll defer to you.
Would you? It wouldn't be surprising if this was the number one movie in Pittsburgh because it's such a Pittsburgh film, even down to having a huge action set piece in PNC Park, as if this is like sudden death in the Civic Arena. But
Well, I'll be honest. You already know this. You already know this about it. I've never been to Pittsburgh. I don't plan to go to Pittsburgh.
Not yet.
Except for, of course, when I'm there for your child's christening. I am the godfather, after all. So, that, I'll show up in Pittsburgh. But I do request that you do it outside of Pittsburgh, if you can.
Sure. We'll meet up. We'll go to Permanis or something and have Yingling beers and talk the talk, I guess.
Hey, I am in for Yingling. First beer I had when I was 21, because they do have it outside of Pennsylvania. So, and I am a fan. But yeah, that is Sweet Girl. Now, maybe you want to grab a few Yinglings with your buds, depending on where you live and you're of age, and maybe check it out on Netflix if you're looking for a brief little distraction there.
You'll probably need them to get through it, to be honest.
Yeah, I watched this movie pretty sober, and there you go.
I wish I wasn't sober when I was watching it, I'll be honest.
This movie is also 110 minutes long, so that's actually kind of a weird coincidence there. Let's talk about our next film here. Reminiscence. Reminiscence is a new film. We've talked about it a little bit over the course of the show and talking box office and things of that nature, but this is a new Warner Brothers thing. It came out on HBO Max and on theaters same day. Will, you kind of described it earlier. I looked at it as like a neo-noir sci-fi, and it's noir, right? Neo-noir. So it's got a little bit of the thriller aspect to it. Kind of reminds of something like Blade Runner. It's kind of going a little bit for the Blade Runner thing. The poster itself clearly wants to be Blade Runner. So a lot of similarities, at least in that way. This was written and directed by Lisa Joy. This is her feature directorial debut, and I think people will recognize her as being one of the co-creators, writers, directors, and I think executive producers of Westworld, which is still going on in HBO. Have you ever watched Westworld? Well, I don't think you have you?
I have seen the pilot season premiere episode.
Okay.
And I was like, maybe I'll keep watching. And I didn't keep watching.
I gotcha. I watched the first season, and it was kind of hard for me to get through. I'm not going to lie. I watched 1 or 2 episodes of the second season, and I dropped off. Now, that said, my family loves Westworld. They have long conversations about the show. They're big fans, so I think it's just a me thing that I'm not as into it. And also from Westworld, appearing in this movie is Tandy Newton.
Yeah. And Angela Starafonen.
Who is that?
She has she has like really big eyes, brunette hair.
She's in Westworld?
Yeah. I think so.
I'd have to. The name does not strike as familiar. I apologize.
I'll look up the character name. Maybe that'll ring a bell as you describe the rest of the plot. I
think I've forgotten all of the names of the characters from Westworld, but unless you mean Reminiscence. But yeah. I think I know who you're talking about. She plays Elsa in Reminiscence, doesn't she? She like kind of shows up later. She has like the dream thing.
Yeah, she's like the Elsa. Yes, yeah.
Okay,
that's her.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I did not know that actress by name, but she's familiar. I've seen her in a few things, but yeah. This movie, like I said, it bears a lot of resemblance to things like Blade Runner. Also, a little bit. If you're going back even further, if you're going to go to like the original noir, you could look at something like The Maltese Falcon, and it has a little bit of sort of like the Total Recall, Westworld, like the original 1973 Westworld kind of feel to it.
Well, yeah, the big one probably is Blade Runner. Is
like I said, yeah.
I think, yeah. Right.
And it's got sprinkles of a lot of different things kind of mixed up in it. It's kind of an interesting setup. The world of this movie, by the way, it stars Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson, Cliff Curtis, Daniel Wu, a few others. One of the other things about this movie that's pretty unique is that so it takes place in the future, and like there are these like rising tides that have kind of swept up the world. The world is like partly submerged now by water. So like we literally have like canals like in major cities. The movie takes place primarily in Miami, South Miami. So it literally has a place called the Sunken Coast, where like the beach is almost completely like underwater at this point. Mm-hmm. We're in this sort of like Firefly situation where we're in the aftermath of all these wars, and our main character is like a veteran from the war. His partner in his like business that he now runs is also a veteran of the war. So they're longtime pals. Mm-hmm.
Something with the Gulf, I think they said.
It's like a Gulf War or something like that. Yeah. The border. They were part of like a border thing where they had to like keep people out. I don't know. It was a little kind of vague, but it was interestingly vague. Like it had some fun little world building quirks there, where it never totally spells out everything that happened in like the lead up, but it also, some stuff you get detail. But yeah, that's kind of like the setup for the movie. But the real hook of this sci-fi premise is not necessarily the canals. I think that's just kind of like a flourish of this world. It kind of adds a little bit of like world building to it. The real like through line of this movie is that there's this technology now that is kind of like a cross between like Total Recall and maybe like a little bit of Minority Report, where you can submerge somebody in this like tank, hook them up to wires, and you can play their memories, holographically. So like all your memories, it's like Inside Out, you kind of just have this like projector, and you need somebody who's kind of skilled and a professional to guide people through their own memories so you can access them. I really liked that quirk because it made it feel like, okay, this is something that not everybody can do. It takes a little bit of like psychology, which fits the noir hook of it pretty well. I thought that was like a nice little trick.
Though one thing that bugged me, and I don't know if it bugged you, about the idea of tracing memory that I felt like would have made the movie more interesting is if they actually explored the fact that memory is kind of faulty and that people, like, when they remember things, they don't exactly remember it the way it exactly happened.
Yeah, but didn't they gloss that over though by saying that like their memory of it might be faulty, or like their interpretation of their own memory might be faulty, but the memory itself is basically, it's there. It's just hard for the person. I didn't read the film as saying like that's how they remember
I get what.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that was like what they're kind of like shying away or like, explaining it away by doing that. But I felt like that would have been a more interesting avenue to explore, like the fact that people like only remember certain things, or like even if they subconsciously remember things, they remember it in certain ways, and everyone has like a different perception of how things went down based on their memory of that situation. But
I get what you're saying. I guess they wanted to avoid the unreliable narrator kind of just making this too abstract. I think that might have happened. So, but yeah, that's a good point. The main plot of this movie is that Hugh Jackman's character, he's been doing this for a while. He's like a grizzled, barely makes any money. He and Tandy Newton's character have just been sort of, helping people relive memories as a way to sort of get through the drudgery of their modern lives. Like, everything is so bad right now. They have to go into the past to sort of like make themselves feel better. And then sure enough, Rebecca Ferguson's character comes into the story. And we sort of meet her. She's our femme fatale, basically. And a lot of the movie is how Hugh Jackman's character, Nick, is pining for her, trying to like understand her, and then eventually like go back through his memories of his limited time with her and understand this mystery behind, was their relationship real? What was she really after? There's, crime bosses, and there are some pretty intense action scenes. But this is another movie, I gotta say, that the action scenes were kind of like check your phone action scenes for me. I just did not find them very impressive personally, with the exception of maybe like one shootout, which was kind of fun. But
I was gonna say, I thought the shootout was cool.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I think my overall thoughts on this movie is I kind of called it a curiosity earlier. Like it's interesting. It's got some fun ideas. I don't know. It's doing things that I like in terms of like sci-fi movies, sort of, introducing different kind of concepts, and it's very ambitious in what it's trying to do. But I just didn't have that like emotional connection to this main character. I think that's what it comes down to. I think that I found him very insufferable, and I didn't find his plight very sympathetic. I didn't find a lot of progression to his character at all either. And the movie kind of ends on a note where it's easy to understand why that happens and why that's the point. But I think the result is that I just wasn't like caring about what was going to happen with him or many of the other characters throughout. There were times where I was way more invested in Tandy Newton's character, and I was like, there's such a story there. It's kind of pushed to the side, but I thought bizarrely the film did a much better job of like making her story feel very urgent and feel like I want to know what happens next with her. But then they kind of keep her on the fringes of the movie for a good bit of it in favor of this intrigue with Rebecca Ferguson that just goes on way too long. I think that this movie, it's about 2 hours, and it really overstays its welcome with me. I think after the first hour, I'm like, I got it. Like it does, but it just keeps adding more stuff to sort of pad out the runtime, it felt. So I kind of walked away from this movie kind of ready to forget it. But what about you?
So this is the type of mediocre movie that I think I disrespect, because like we said before, we just don't really get a lot of movies like this, even though it is fairly derivative as far as like how it approaches the story, and also fairly one note and a bit monotone as far as its just general style and tone. But I love the idea that there is a movie that's, like it's a sci-fi noir action thriller that's made primarily for adults. It has like a big, heady, lofty ideas, and I think the beginning of it's really cool. Like I love the opening shot of this. Like there's like kind of like a Third Man-esque like build up to like kind of like we're just kind of like panning into the city, and we're getting a lot of information told in a kind of casual sort of way. Like we're just kind of like gauging everything that we need to know about this world just from a just very visually interesting sort of way. And I think the general setup is cool, but I think once, like you said, like once you get to the general conceit of the story, it just feels a bit tired. Like it just feels like we've run into like kind of like a lukewarm noir femme fatale kind of story that I think is there sort of in service of the world building. Like when I see the movie, I think what interested Lisa Joy is just building this world and like what this future looks like, how it acts, like how people act in it. But then when we get to the story, it's just kind of at the service of that. And to me, that's the big hindrance of the film, is that it just doesn't really seem to have that much interest in its main character or the main story. It's more interested in just building this sort of weird offbeat sci-fi world, which is cool. Like you said, I mean, I love sci-fi worlds like this. I love interacting with them. And that was one reason I was glad I saw it on the big screen, just because it's cool to just kind of be immersed in something like this that's it just kind of feels like it's in touch with reality but also like totally alien to it. And I think that stuff works, but when we actually get to the general main character and the love stories, it just doesn't really do much that is that interesting. I've heard a lot of people compare it to Strange Days, and I haven't seen that film, but I think it just kind of goes to show, like we said, like with that and Blade Runner, it's just kind of impossible not to think of other films where you're watching this, and I think that ultimately makes it too forgettable to really make much of an impression in the long run.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about a lot of other films during. It's funny though, because what I was thinking about instead of the movie for me was, and this was before that I saw that Lisa Joy had directed it, and I was like, oh yeah, Westworld, the show. I kept thinking about how I would like rework this into a show or a miniseries. I was like, I would have ended the first episode like on that hook, and then maybe you could cut out this part, maybe you could add in a subplot that makes this make a little bit more sense. And by the time I got to the end, I was kind of wondering and theorizing for myself if this had originally been a miniseries concept or even like a long-running series concept kind of condensed into a movie, almost like if they had already created 10 episodes of a show and then turned it into a movie. But then you have to cut out a ton of stuff, so it would feel like everything is a little bit limp. I don't know. I could be like way off base there, but I just get that feeling from what I know about, this director, especially even though during the movie I was feeling this way. But that's all to say, it's not a terrible movie or anything. I agree with you that it's pretty mediocre, and there are things about it that I certainly responded to. I think that Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson, like they were in Greatest Showman, just have like get a room energy to them. It's pretty palpable, the chemistry between the two actors. And, I told Will this while I was watching the movie, and he was not happy with me, called me a homewrecker. So I'll take this opportunity now to say I apologize for that, Will Ashton. I don't want to make you upset.
No, for one, I didn't use the term homewrecker. I should clarify.
It felt like you were on the verge.
I don't want to say you're slandering me, but it does feel a bit like slander. Yeah, I mean, it would be ironic if Lisa Joy became prominent because she turned an underseen sci-fi film into a show. If ironically someone eventually, decades later turned her underseen sci-fi film into a show. Yeah, that's a good point. On a prominent streaming service. Yeah.
Yeah. For people who don't know, they're essentially, because Westworld started out as a sci-fi movie that was underseen in the 1970s. The show has been a huge hit, and then that is a good point there. I guess that's the thing though, is it seems like these really ambitious sci-fi like ideas tend to reach more audiences when they're shows. Maybe there's something to the fact that, not the fact, but the indication I get that a lot of people, when they want to watch something sci-fi or fantasy, they don't want to feel like they're going to invest all this time into learning in a new world and then it's going to be like immediately over. I think people like the idea of like, I'm going to start the first episode, I'm going to get hooked, I'm going to get more content that I can sort of piece out. And I think that just seems to fit the show format a little bit better for modern tastes. It's just kind of like how things are right now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I think that aspect is kind of appealing to me. The fact that it's not trying to be a franchise or a series, it's trying to be a standalone, big budget action sci-fi film for adults. But at the same time, like I see all these like seeds of ideas throughout the movie, like different little scenes. Like there's one in particular, it's like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like sort of like a simulation sort of scene, where it's like kind of like they're recreating a certain moment from the past. And it's like, if you really dived into that for like an episode, that'd be a kind of cool idea.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it just kind of feels like, okay, that doesn't really it doesn't really fit here. It just kind of feels like another idea that Lisa Joy had and wanted to include, but there was no like graceful way to include it into the film. So I don't know. But at the same time, this is the kind of flop that I think I endear to. Not enough for me to be like recommending it or saying that like it's good, but like I appreciate the big minded ideas here, and I like that Lisa Joy is just going for it as opposed to just, even if it is fairly derivative, like I said, it is at least trying to do something with its budget and scale that doesn't feel too similar to other films that we're getting right now. There is a throwback kind of 90s quality to it that I find charming, but also there's something about that is annoying, and that it is kind of a bit like obtuse and too like hard to read as far as just like everything is trying to communicate, and the fact that it isn't really doing it with enough pulp to really, I think, justify the kind of pulpy premise. I think that's the biggest issue of it. It's just that like it has like this kind of like kooky premise, but it's played totally straight, and the actors they're saying their lines as seriously as possible. And Hugh Jackman, to his credit, is always committed to his part, but I feel like it needed to play into his charm as an A-list star a little bit more. He's just like pulling it back so much that it doesn't really, like I said, the character just doesn't stand out enough to really like kind of warrant our full attention or interest. It just feels like he's trying to play it as like straight Cagney as possible, I guess, and it just doesn't quite work here, unfortunately.
I think the problem there is that we've seen him play hard-boiled before, but as Wolverine, which has such an energy to it by nature of that performance, so that when he plays a sort of unironic hard-boiled thing, in like a noir send up, it's just kind of weird for this actor. Like it just doesn't quite fit him based on previous, like, I don't know what somebody would think if they saw this before they ever saw a Wolverine performance. Maybe that they'd have a totally different impression. But that was my impression as well. It's like he's kind of like a stone wall of exposition for a lot of this movie, and his reactions to things tend to be so restrained that I think that's part of like why I just didn't connect with this character as much, especially compared to some of the other performances.
Yeah. I don't know. But like I said, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's like, especially now during a pandemic, I don't think it's something that some people should be jumping out of their comfort zone to see. And, I don't think it really justifies spending $10 to really get, like I said, a fairly mediocre kind of C-level film. But at the same time, I do find it distressing and depressing that movies like this are going to become increasingly more and more rare, because studios are just going to be like, well, we tried that. It was Reminiscence. You guys didn't show up. So here are, whatever, like 5 more Space Jam movies.
More like we tried that and didn't market it at all and released it at the wrong time.
Right.
And
well, yes.
Also made it easy for people to stream it at home. So,
right. But they're not going to say that, obviously. Yeah. They're just going to be like, hey, we made that movie and we released it and no one showed up. Therefore, that means nobody wants it, as opposed, like making it like near impossible for certain people to see it, as far as like them not knowing about it, giving them an alternative to seeing it in theaters, releasing it, like I said, during an increasingly distressing pandemic. But, at the same time, like thankfully I'm at a position where I can go to the movies and at least at the time, and check it out. And I'll admit I was worried about it because, it's hard not to when you read the news, but no one else was there but me. So I think that just kind of goes to show people literally are just not showing up to this movie, and it's going to fade in the wind probably by next week. I mean, hell, it feels like we're late to it already and it just came out. But yeah, it's just, I mourn the idea, I guess, this movie, as opposed to like it itself is just kind of forgettable and mediocre. But the fact that it's kind of a dying breed that's probably going to be more and more, or increasingly harder to find from a studio system. I guess that's what I find depressing. I guess it's just that it's gonna be a last of its kind. I guess because it's becoming more and more likely that Warner Brothers is not going to take a risk with something like this for a blank check project for someone like Lisa Joy, and that just sucks.
I guess pretty soon this movie will be hard to reminisce about because we'll forget about it. Will, can you guess what the Rotten Tomatoes score is? I don't know if you've seen it.
It's like 38%?
Close, 36% on Rotten Tomatoes, average rating of 5.2. Can you guess the cinema score?
Oh.
There is a cinema score. People did watch it.
C?
That was close too. Man, we should do this more often, see how well you do. C+. No cheating, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So definitely not connecting pretty well with the audiences who are checking it out, which is, I would expect something like this would be a little bit higher, maybe in the Bs, but yeah, because like maybe people are just seeing Hugh Jackman on the poster and are expecting something that they're not getting, but yeah, that's Reminiscence. It's available to watch on HBO Max right now. You can also check it out in theaters. I believe it's available on IMAX in some theaters, and it is 116 minutes long, so just under 2 hours. Time for our last film here. And very excited to talk about this one because we both saw it earlier in the year, and we're going to just briefly review it here. Obviously, we're talking about Cryptozoo. Obviously, we aren't going to be able to go into too much detail because we saw the film back in January. It's been 8 months. But what we do remember, we'll do our best to relay to you, the listeners. And this is one of those festival releases where, even though it hasn't made much of a splash, usually we would have relegated it to off topics. I think the reason we're going to talk about it now is mainly because, well, it's just one of those movies that we both want more people to hear about. And it's called Cryptozoo, like I said. It's an adult animated kind of, is it a drama? It's like an absurdist drama, right? It's written and directed by Dash Shah, and the cast is fantastic.
Yeah. It's dramedy. I mean, definitely it is satirical by design, but yeah, it is more dramatic than you might expect going into it.
Right. It takes itself more seriously than you might think if you kind of look at some of the marketing for it, or like from the poster to, I haven't seen the trailer actually. I want to watch the trailer after this and see how it does. Critically, it's also a kind of a mixed film. We'll talk about the Rotten Tomatoes score later, but first, the setup for Cryptozoo is that we have this world where there are crypts. I think they were called cryptos, something like that. They're like creatures, like mythological creatures, right? So think like, American Dragon, Jake Long. It's one of those things where like the world secretly has these mythical creatures living in secret. And, the movie kind of starts off with this like young couple in love, and they stumble upon a place called Cryptozoo, where these mythical creatures are being held in like a zoo format in a way so that the public can appreciate and love them. But then we kind of see that there are some unpredictable consequences to having a Cryptozoo. There's some intrigue around the ethical rights of these crypto creatures. And there's certainly a lot of hilarity. There's a lot of surrealism. And like I said, this is animated. There is a lot of there's a beautiful tapestry to this film and how it presents its characters. For me, it was one of the most memorable films to come out at Sundance Film Festival. It's one of my favorite films of the year. And I think the reason I like this so much is because, first of all, the imagination behind it. Yes, these are like creatures, like these are sort of like mythological creatures. There's a lot of references to things you might recognize, but there are a lot of original character designs, and there are so many characters that like come through this movie in such a fascinating way, like really surrealist, but at the same time, it's not so abstract that you like lose track of like the heart of the movie. And this movie has like endless heart. I really love the characters here. Lake Bell plays one of our main characters in this. We also have Michael Cera. We have Zoe Kazan. I almost forgot her name, and quite a few others. So yeah, I really liked this one. I'm really glad that I was able to see it back in January. I don't know if I would have been able to see it now in theaters. That would have been really tricky, like I mentioned earlier. But yeah, Will, you like Cryptozoo as well, right?
Yeah, I did, and I was I saw it when it premiered, I guess virtually. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, wow, that was like a really cool, inventive, charming adult animated film. And I was like, I didn't have any expectations for what people would feel about it, but I remember the reaction at Sundance for the most part was like mixed to kind of negative, and I was taken aback a little bit because like I felt, it can be a bit twee, it can be a little like self-satisfied in a way that I can understand that turning some people off, but I also just admire the gumption and the scope and the world building of this so much, and just the artistry as far as just not only just like the actual like animation itself, but just the absurd character designs, just the like you said, the unique animals, just the weird creative ideas that are thrust into this thing. And there is something very singular about it. Like you can tell that it's just primarily the work of one uniquely minded animator who is just kind of making this in his own weird headspace and filled with all these big ideas for what this world should be and how it should act and how characters should react in it and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I know when I recommended it to you, it kind of came with like a cadence of like, yeah, I mean, I liked it, but I mean, I don't know, like, other people aren't really digging it. So, I guess like proceed with caution. And you came out not only positive, but like way more positive than even I was. So that was charming to see, I felt.
Yeah, I was, because I had heard bad things. I'd heard like, oh, it's too weird. I had heard that it was too cloying, too tweed. I think one of the things that got to me with this movie is it's the hand-drawn animation. First of all, it's just gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. I sat there just staring at this movie and just like obviously thinking what I think everybody will think when they see this. We're like, man, this person was clearly on something, acid, LSD. And at the same time, it has a really well executed political allegory, right? It's some people might call it a little bit too on the nose with what it's trying to say, but in terms of like the world should be a bit balanced and we should treat living creatures with respect. There's an effort in this movie to really humanize quite literally these crypt creatures, and even the ones that are dangerous. And I think a Man at the Jedi, friend of the show, said this is like Jurassic Park on acid, and I think that's a pretty apt comparison. There's a lot of Jurassic Park in this in terms of its themes.
I guess. I mean, I feel like that's also kind of simplistic, but I can understand from a broad point of view why that comparison was made.
I think so. I mean, it's more about like the heart of Jurassic Park and the sort of like zoo format, but then with all of the imagination and the world, all this extra stuff thrown in there to make this world really come to life. And yeah, I really responded to it. One thing that I hope doesn't get like lost in the conversation around this movie, a little that there is just how like with hand-drawn animation, people usually are like, yeah, it's hand-drawn animation, it's flat compared to computer animation. And I think this movie is one of the proofs of how like, no, there's a way for you to do animation where literally there are actual layers to everything that you're seeing. That's one of the like the stealth benefits of hand-drawn is that you can like filter and make things translucent, and literally like sheets of colors can be on top of each other, creating visuals that you can't really replicate in computer animation to quite the same way. And for me, it's a big reason why we still need hand-drawn animation, because it can produce results that are so unique and of their own. And in this case, really aid the story. I think that it helps the story a lot to make this such a storybook kind of thing and to make it sort of pop in the way it does, so that everything kind of like meshes together and feels like an art book, on display. So yeah, I just, that for me is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, and also like you said, as far as the political and social commentary of it, I just love the way that it builds this sort of eco culture as like almost like a sort of like liberal safe haven, but like also explores just the inherent struggles of like idealism, but also individuality in a way that I think is very thoughtful and intriguing. And I just think generally speaking, what's most fitting about the film is that it was just really nice to be enveloped into this sort of bewitching and just like fanciful sort of world for like an hour and change, and just be wrapped up in all these like absurd ideas and these beautiful artistries and stuff like that. And I would say in an unconventional Sundance, Pliny was one of the best characters.
Yep.
I know you also were quite fond of Pliny. I would love a little plush toy of Pliny. He's just so sad.
Yeah.
Funny as a character. I thought Pliny in particular. I mean, all the characters are quite good, but Pliny is the star.
Pliny was fantastic. Oh my gosh, I remember.
Is it pronounced Pliny? It's been a while.
I thought it was Pliny.
But I remember, I thought it was like Pliny, but yeah, he's just such a beautiful, sad little weird man.
Yeah, I was gonna say too. I mean, this is a very adult film. I know I already called it an adult animated film, but it's got some really hardcore material in it. There's nudity.
Yeah.
There's like some gore. I don't want to make it sound too much of like, families come out and see, like if you loved wolf walkers, anything like that. It doesn't, I say storybook and it's not a fairy tale, but it's kind of like a demented fairy tale, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the opening scene alone is like in a traditional year, that would be like in the first 3 minutes, like a parent accidentally brings their kids to this. It's like, all right, we gotta go.
A zoo with magical creatures. Let's go.
Right.
And they're watching
with
like
talking animals and all these fun visuals. Oh, sure.
The kid already has a plush toy of Pliny.
Yeah, it reminds me of when back like in the normal times when we do like the film festival and we'd have an animated film, and primarily almost always it was for adults, but and no matter what, if it's anything animated, like people would always bring like their kids and their family, just because obviously they're just like animation equals kids and family, and just like always like 15 minutes later walking out because whatever, like some truly adult thing just happened on screen. It's just like, yeah, people have this weird conception of that, it makes sense because, whatever, 7 out of 10 times animated movies are generated towards kids, but people just don't, read the fine print as far as what some of their animated films contain, and they find out the hard way for sure.
Hopefully there's some warning signs.
Probably more ways than one.
Hopefully there are warning signs though that were like, this isn't playing at AMC Regal or the local Century, but
sure,
it is playing at that art house theater that's already traumatized our young child, with whatever
but
else.
But that's the thing, right? It's like these kind of like, I mean, I don't want to generalize or assume, but like kind of like these like more highbrow, socially conscious types who are just like, oh, we're going to show our kids something a little bit smarter than Madagascar 6 or Ice Age 7, like, and then
let's go to the Embarcadero. That's the San Francisco theater that I think is playing this, and show our kid Cryptozoo. Yeah, and I would say too, in terms of that, like on that note, one of the things I was thinking about, surprisingly enough, I was thinking a lot about South Park in this movie. I just remember thinking that it reminds me of how in South Park you also have this sort of like kind of preachy message that sort of bemoans all sides of like a political issue. It doesn't really,
sure,
it doesn't lean one way more than the other necessarily. And then
I don't know if it's quite as
it's not
scolding,
humorous.
I guess.
Yeah, it's not scolding, but it certainly has a point to like the extremes of society. And this movie, we should say, it's not nearly the same type of humor. It's not cheap humor at all. It's very, very smart writing.
Yeah, but I mean, Imagination Land is an easy comparison, I guess.
That's what I was kind of leaning toward. Like, there have been South Park things that have like elements that remind me of Cryptozoo and have sharp writing too. Like I would say, like the Cthulhu stuff, that they do in that one arc of South Park. There's a bunch of stuff.
You mean Cthulhu?
Cthulhu, whatever you call it.
I thought it was Cthulhu, but I could be wrong.
Something. It's dangerous. That's what we know. But I think that's all to say that we both like this movie and that it's to me, it's kind of sad that nobody's talking about it. I haven't heard anything about it. I haven't heard people coming out to see it. And to me, it's like one of the more interesting movies I've saw this year.
I agree, but I think it was always going to be more of a festival darling than something that even got close to mainstream appeal, even in the like film Twitter world. Sure, but I mean, this is like not the opposite of Coda, but like doing something totally different from Coda, where it's like that's like a broadly appealing film, obviously has like a unique and worthwhile perspective, but obviously trying to appeal to as many audiences as possible. This one is just like, hey, you're on our wavelength or you're not. Like, if you're not, sorry. Like, we're just doing our thing.
Okay, I have the analogy.
Hope you enjoy the ride.
All right, I have the analogies. Coda is like Taco Bell Cantina. I don't know if you've ever been to a Taco Bell Cantina. It's the more upscale version of Taco Bell.
Yes.
Cryptozoo is a home-cooked meal in the basement of a drug lord. And they're just a surprisingly fantastic cook. You don't know how to explain it. You're not sure you can recommend the cuisine to anybody else, but you sure enjoyed it. That's for sure.
You're talking like a hole in the wall kind of place. That's like, it doesn't catch your eye at first, but you're like, oh, you know what?
No, I'm literally
I've seen that
talking
place
about
before.
like a drug dealer's like basement.
Oh, okay.
Like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo makes you this amazing 5-course meal.
You're implying an element of danger with this film, though, that I don't think is quite warranted. Like, it's not like taboo. I don't, outside of like the sex and the nudity and stuff like that, I don't think it's a particularly taboo film. It just so inherently trying to be offbeat and individualistic as far as its approach. I mean, people are going to make kind of cheap comparisons to like whatever Wes Anderson or South Park, like you said, but like I think itself, what's his name? Dash Shaw is the filmmaker behind this, right?
Yeah.
And he also did My Entire High School Sinking into the Sea, which I enjoyed. And that's another film where it's just like, it has kind of like a picture book quality to it, where it kind of feels like you're kind of flipping through like an offbeat Zine sort of thing, where you're like kind of like, this weird artist has like made these like, kind of weird concept ideas that you like, but you kind of, it's like an underground sort of thing. Like you just find it in like a weird comic book shop or something like that, in like the back aisle or whatever. And I think that's the vibe of like a lot of his work, and I think that's certainly the case with this film. But yeah, I mean that would be the comparison that I would make with this film. And
we should mention Dash Shaw, like in addition to being an animator and the director here, he's also a comic book artist and comic book writer. He's done a bunch of pretty well-known graphic novels, and has a bit of a fantastical reputation. So, I've never checked out any of his comic stuff, but you can definitely tell, he's of that mind, and I love I love how graphic novels especially are evolving for comic artists now that readers of comics are kind of entering a sort of like, there's like this Gen X millennial kind of appetite for more mature, grounded, edgier comics and graphic novels that I love to see personally. And I think Cryptozoo is kind of a fun reflection of that like growing sort of like demographic in that way, but one that is not likely to find much of an audience, very, very limited audience as it were, but a gem of a movie, if you ask me, and it sounds like you will. No matter the case, I'll be surely recommending this to plenty of people over the years, and when I find out if their tastes are, at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I would recommend the film. I did like it a good bit. It was probably if not my top 5, then certainly my top 10 for Sundance this year. But it's the type of film I have some caveats where I'm just like, I can definitely see some people being like, this is insufferable and weird, and I don't get it. And it's like, yeah, I don't blame anybody for not liking it. But at the same time, I'm more disappointed when people are just like, no, just not my thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think back to, he wasn't like in the Cinemaholics crew per se, but our friend Corey Woodruff was, kind of palling around with us while we were doing the virtual Sundance this year. And I had recommended this film to him just because he was interested. I was like, yeah, I think at the very least it's worth a try. And he got, I think, like 5 minutes in, and it was just like, nope, not for me. And I was like, I'm disappointed he didn't try it more. But like, I just feel like that's going to be the response that a lot of people are going to have. Like, even, like Corey, obviously is very film literate, like very willing to try a lot of different things. I'm not like putting him on the spot here. I'm just using him as an example. Of
I'll
just
bring him
like,
into the call. Hold on.
Sure.
Hey, Corey. So Will's been calling you out.
Yeah. No, okay. Hey, Corey.
He said you're film literate, and so we'll start with the compliments. It sounded condescending to me.
Oh, okay. It wasn't meant to be condescending.
I know. I'm just joking. But I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, my point being, like, I think even some people with open minds and curious perspectives will just be instantly kind of turned off by this. Like you said, they perceive it as too twee or, too self-indulgent or insufferable for whatever number of reasons. But I think it's worth a shot. I mean, at the very least, if it's interesting to you and you love animation, especially if you love animation, I think it's worth trying, because this movie is going to be completely and totally different than basically any other anime film you're going to get this year. And it's also, like I said, very singular to its main artist. I don't know what word I was making up there, but yeah, it's worth a shot, I think. And I hope more people than not enjoy it. But like I said, I can definitely understand some folks are just not going to mesh or jive or groove with this film in any particular way.
Definitely agree. All right. What's your guess for the Rotten Tomatoes. Here we go. What do you think?
72%.
Not bad. A little lower though. 67%. You're good at this game. I want to keep playing it. 67% out of 73 reviews, an average rating of 5.7 out of 10. And I can see that. I can see a lot of critics, especially for coming out of Sundance, not vibing with this. I should write about it because I have positive things to say, and I'd love to add my review to the conversation, but I'd have to rewatch it. It's been too long. I don't want to review it without having rewatched it myself.
Yeah.
And, no cinema score that I see a record of, but
sure.
I think we can imagine what that.
They
might
all
be.
just walked out.
Yeah, you can't have a cinema score if you don't have a cinema. But that's Cryptozoo, and it's a short watch too, 95 minutes long. I don't know if it's going to be available on demand anytime soon. It could be right now, for all I know. I don't think it is, but hopefully
I think it is.
People can check it out soon.
It's on VOD right now,
Okay.
I think it's on VOD right now, yeah.
I know it played at another festival earlier this summer, so I had another round of reviews come in for that. Definitely worth your time. If you're interested in animation, I think we definitely agree on liking this movie, but understanding it does kind of have a limited audience, limited appeal, and hopefully you are in that zone. If not, no worries, because you'll always have Reminiscence and Sweet Girl, and I'm getting depressed again. Will Ashton, next week we have some fun stuff coming up, don't we? We have Candyman.
Well, we have Candyman,
yeah,
which is going to be good, I hope.
I think Candyman could be really fun. That's the new movie that Jordan Peele produced, right? Executive produced. And
yes,
yeah,
and he co-wrote it, I believe.
He did co-write it, yeah, and it's directed by Nita Costa, who I think we're gonna have quite a conversation next week about that movie. Nita Costa also co-wrote it.
Very excited.
The latest Monkey Paw thing, and it's a remake. And I was thinking about maybe rewatching the original Candyman in the lead up. Have you seen the original?
Yeah, I watched it last year actually.
Oh, did you do it for the horror thing?
It's a good film.
Okay.
No, actually, I think it just kind of happened like early in the pandemic.
Okay.
I was in like a virtual like watch room, and they put it on, and I saw it that way. But I want to rewatch it because there's like a lot of talking over it and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I didn't get to fully appreciate it, but I love a lot of it, especially like the score and the cinematography. It's very well put together film.
Candyman's going to be hitting theaters, and then there's also a new Hulu movie coming out we're looking at probably talking about called Vacation Friends with I think Lil Rel Howery is in that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. John Cena's in it.
John Cena is in it
as well.
yeah. He's supposed to have kind of a weird kind of like character in there. I think this movie was written by John Francis Daley, so I'm kind of like, the guy who did Game Night, one of the writers, yeah. So
I think
he's one of the writers of this one.
Produced it. I think he produced it. I didn't know he wrote it though.
Game Night. I think he was one of the writers. Could be wrong.
No. I meant for this film.
Oh, for this film, he's one of the writers. Yeah. I did see that.
Okay, I didn't know that. I thought he produced it, but I didn't know he helped write it as well.
It just kind of looks like a comedy, kind of like a generic comedy a little bit, but it could be fun. But here's the movie.
Not even
what?
I just thought it was so funny that like it's not just a comedy. It's just like, it looks like comedy. Like it looks like something that's supposed to be funny.
yeah, basically, much to add there. But I think though we're gonna regret making Candyman the featured review. You know why? I think we're gonna realize we missed out on He's All That.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
being facetious, of course.
Surely gonna be the number one movie on Netflix, and everyone's probably gonna hate it.
But yet it's gonna be the biggest.
Yeah.
But I think the reason I first of all, I think the reason I'm gonna watch it no matter what is because Tanner Buchanan from Cobra Kai is in it. And I know Will Ashton, Cobra Kai is your favorite show of all time. You've seen every episode a few times each. Wait, what?
Saw 2 episodes.
I
saw 2 of them.
But hey, also Addison Rae is in this, and Madison Pettis, who I can't remember the last. I don't think I've seen a film with Madison Pettis since like The Game Plan.
Oh, she starred in the most recent direct-to-video American Pie movie.
Wow, that's kind of weird to imagine, considering child star Madison Pettis. But hey, okay.
Sure. That was a big hit on Netflix.
Okay.
Apparently.
You're a big hit on Netflix, Will Ashton.
Oh, thank you.
So that's He's All That, which of course it seems like they're doing the reversal, right? Of She's All That, the 90s classic film, if you ask me, where, I think that's where we reached peak. A character takes their glasses off and is suddenly attractive. If that doesn't happen in He's All That, then I will probably pause the movie to collect myself, right?
See, And I think this movie has kind of not the She's All That, the movie I'm about to mention. I feel like it has kind of a checkered reputation, but I think this is one of those rare times, like an Airplane situation, where the movie that's parodying it is a little better than the actual movie. And you know what movie I'm talking about, of course, right?
No.
Not Another Teen Movie?
Oh,
Chris
yeah,
Evans?
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah.
That's a childhood classic of mine. That's when I was introduced to Joshua Radnor.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, he has it's like more of a cameo in that one, right? It's like really
not
small.
even a cameo because he wasn't famous at the time. It's just sort of like a bit role, extra. Basically.
Yeah, but I have more affection for Not Another Teen Movie than She's All That, personally. But I know a lot of people have nostalgia for it.
Same here. That's hilarious movie. And then the last movie I really hope we get to talk about, No Man of God, which I've been looking forward to a little bit. Reviews are pretty positive, not amazing.
Okay.
That's the Ted Bundy kind of drama thing.
Is that the one from the director of The Great Beauty?
That's directed by Amber Seeley, who I don't remember her filmography. You said The Big Nothing?
No, The Great Beauty.
I think she did Big Nothing and How to Cheat, and I don't know if she did that movie.
I might be thinking of a different Netflix movie that's coming out. That's like something. I think it's called like The Hand of God.
Oh, okay. I think
maybe I'm mixing
God's
these.
Own Country or something. Maybe.
No, that was a director of Ammonite, or Ammonite.
Okay.
That was. Oh, I'll look it up.
Well, the reason I'm interested in this one, first of all, is because Elijah Wood. Always happy to see him in a movie, but also Robert Cargill is the writer, and it feels like it's kind of been a while since we've gotten a Robert Cargill flick. I'm not.
See Robert Cargill.
See Robert Cargill, yeah. Doctor Strange and Sinister and all that, yeah.
Oh yeah, from Spill.com.
Yeah, film critic turned screenwriter, and always interested in what he has going on. I will say, so this movie will be on limited release and also will be streaming, I think, VOD. I'm not super interested in the premise, to be honest. Like the whole like Ted Bundy, like it's kind of like Mindhunter, I think is the premise, but I'll watch it. We'll see. But that's everything. We might talk about.
Is that on
next
Netflix?
Week. No Man of God?
Is that on Netflix? Is that the movie you're just talking about?
No, I think that's going to be hitting streaming and stuff. I don't think it's a Netflix movie.
Oh, okay. Where's that going?
Well, like I said, I think it's going to be limited release and streaming on demand.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. So what's that one called?
No Man of God.
Okay, so the movie,
right.
the movie I was thinking of that's coming to Netflix is called The Hand of God.
Oh, okay.
So you can understand my confusion.
Sure. It's close. But all right, that's it for us this week. Thanks as always for listening. We'll be back to talk about hopefully all those movies, maybe some of them. We'll see. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.